Hello and welcome to the Work Inspired podcast. I'm George Lucas Pfeiffer, your host, and today we've got a great episode, as usual. But on today's episode, I'm particularly excited because we've been looking forward to this for quite some time. We're speaking with Hiffman National's Senior Vice President, Carrie Szarzynski, and we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about personal growth, career path, unexpected curves and how you can learn from them, return to the workplace, work culture, leadership, and so much more. It's going to be a great conversation. I know you're going to learn a lot. Let's get started. Work Inspired begins now. Carrie, thank you so much for being here. Been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. Excited that today's the day.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for being on the show. So we start every episode off with the same question because each guest that we have on, we have them on because we find them to be inspiring professionals. And so we like to find out kind of how did they get to where they're at today. So tell us a little bit about your professional story.
So I started in commercial real estate at 19. Which is a very young age to start, but I am the daughter of a building chief engineer on Michigan Avenue who's been in that building for about 40 years. I'm the oldest of 5, and so going away to college was not really an option. We had to look at some creative ways to do things, and a year after attending school, it became obvious I needed to get a job, found a part-time temporary job with U.S. Equities Realty, which is where my dad was at the time, and got that introduction. And very quickly, my boss at the time said, you can make a career out of this. And if you go back to school at night, I'll teach you how to be a property manager. And I said, okay, let's do it. And so we did. Within a year, I was a property manager. And it took a long time to finish that first half of my degree because back in the day, there were not these adult accelerated programs that exist now. So it was, going to work all day from 8 to 5 and then driving to school and being in school from 6 to 10, 4 nights a week and continuing to pursue that degree. Ironically, at the time, I thought I was going to be a teacher. So I really thought that was still what I was going to do. So when I graduated with an associate's degree, it was in early childhood. So I stayed at U.S. Equities for about 7 years and had my first child. And my first day back to work, and I tell this story because it's a crazy situation, but my first day back to work after that was September 11th.
Oh, wow.
So she's a 2001 baby, and that was a tough day to be your first day back after maternity leave. And so there was a little bit of some thinking about what I wanted to do with my life and what made sense. And I stayed with U.S. Equities for a couple more months and then decided it was time to stay home. So I stayed home with my daughter, had 2 more children at that time in 2003 and 2005, and started teaching preschool. I mentioned that's what my associate's degree was in. My kids were attending a private school, and it made sense for me to work there and have the same schedule that they had. I taught preschool for 5 years, and during that time, went back and completed my degree in organizational leadership. As I was completing that degree, again, thought I was going to stay with teaching. I was in a school system, and it made sense, but fell in love again with the business world and sat there in this cohort and thought, wow, this is where my gifts are, and this is where I need to go back to. So as I completed that degree, my youngest got into first grade, so was in full-time school, and things made sense to come back. So I came back into real estate in about 2012. And started back up, and this time did not go back to U.S. Equities because really wanted to kind of forge my own path and create a different direction for myself. So went back to GE Capital and started managing Class A office buildings and kind of take it from there and joined Hiffman 5 years ago and was one of about 8 team leaders that started with the company. Really took that opportunity because I loved the chance to do the real estate, but also manage teams. I had found in that time of coming back that while I loved the real estate and I loved doing it, really leading, coaching, and guiding people was where my passion was. And Hiffman gave me an opportunity to do that. Within my first year, I was promoted to director, and for the last 4 years, I've helped run the department.
That's incredible. And I think what's really relevant about that is that you talked about September 11th. Now we've gone through the pandemic, and it's the same situation where there's a lot of professionals that are rethinking their priorities. I think there's the working from home and the just prioritization of family has caused people to say, maybe I'll take some time off. I know personally in our family, that's what we decided with my wife, and she left a great career to stay home. And now we have 3 kids. And at some point we're thinking about what's her reentry look like.
That's right.
How was, I guess I'd love to just focus on that for a minute.
Absolutely.
But what was that decision like for you? Was it was it scary to say that, like I've taken some time off? Because what was it, 10 years?
It was 10 years total. Yeah, it was 10 years total.
Were you like, I'm ready to go? Or like, what was the thought process?
It's such a great question. And it was such a variety of feelings. And I think the fact that I eased into it. So the first 5 years I was home. Mm-hmm. I was working a little bit for people, kind of doing some consulting work where I could help, but really I was home. Mm-hmm. The next 5 years I was teaching preschool. Right. So I was working full time, not summers, but full time during the day. But I was in the school with the kids. And if there was something, if somebody was sick, I was right there. And it was a big adjustment to consider leaving that. The things that I really thought about was, where do I want to be? Mm-hmm. What type of position do I want? I have been out for 10 years. How different is it going to be? And I laugh today, people want to talk about prop tech and how things have changed. And I'm like, it's not that different. Yeah. And I expected it to be more different, I think, than it was when I came back in 10 years later. So the things that really, when we sat down and thought about it, the priorities were trying to keep that work-life balance the best I possibly could, making sure that we were having really open, honest conversations, my husband and I, about who's going to be responsible for what. Because when you're home, you take on a little bit more of the balance of what's going on at home. Sure. So whether it's kids' appointments or things that are happening, and we had to reevaluate who was spending time on what and what that looked like. It also was important to me to stay in the suburbs. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be able to get to somebody if they needed me quickly. Being downtown and being on a train schedule and having that kind of limitation was not something I was comfortable with at that time. Right. Different today, certainly, but back then they were still young and I wanted to be able to be on field trips and to be able to do those things. So as I interviewed, I made sure that I was asking those questions. I made sure that I understood what the culture of the organization was. I also didn't come back in as a property manager. I came back as an assistant because I felt like I needed to get my arms around it again and make sure that I was comfortable back in that role. It was, again, very quickly, within, I think, 6 months, that I was promoted to property manager because I had the skill set. Sure. I just wasn't sure I had the confidence. Right. And so really it was a lot of talking to a lot of different people, making sure I understood. Definitely didn't know what the price point was to come back in. So, as I interviewed and I started throwing out what I thought it was and somebody said, oh, that's not a problem. I'm like, let's increase that the next interview. Right. And so slowly worked my way into figuring out what my worth was at that point and just making sure it was the right balance for my family at the time.
It's very cool. And obviously, if you're able to manage a class full of preschoolers, yes, buildings and professional teams is probably easy, right?
I joke with everyone that there's so many more similarities than you think, right? So number one, you're dealing with people. Mm-hmm. And I just heard a quote today that in property management, 75% is people management and 25% is real estate management. And somebody quizzed me on it and said, what do you think it'll be? And I said, 70%. They're like, you're close at 75%. I said, that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. What it really is people. It's really understanding people, really understanding the tenants, the clients, what the needs are. Managing buildings and teaching preschool are similar in that way. When you're teaching preschool, you're dealing with, yes, very young children. It's a little bit different. You're dealing with the parents. You're dealing with the other teachers. You're trying to set expectations. You're trying to make sure people's goals are being met, even if it's just learning to understand the alphabet versus, making sure your NOI is where you need it to be. So learning how to work with people crosses all industries.
And in that setting, you're managing the most important asset there is, and that's people's children.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's a cool story. And I think we talk a lot about professional, situations and stories on this show, but it's so relevant that so many people think about that. And I think one of the things I heard you say was that as you were going through the process and rebuilding your knowledge on the market and where you could create your path for yourself, you were interviewing the companies that you were
absolutely
just as much as they were interviewing you.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned culture fit. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit, because now you've been at Hiffman for 5 years.
I have.
What's the culture like at Hiffman? I mean, obviously you identified them as a place where you could accelerate your career, and it seems like you have very quickly. So talk a little bit to me about the Hiffman team and that organization from a culture perspective.
Absolutely. So when I came to Hiffman 5 years ago, the reason why I did was I saw an opportunity to be a part of something bigger. I had been at a lot of the larger firms, and while they were great experiences and there was nothing negative about it, I felt a little boxed in. This is the way we do things. Even if it didn't make sense, even if it wasn't the most efficient process, this is how they did it, and they weren't willing to change that thought process. Sure. I really am someone who's got a lot of ideas and very strategic, and I wanted to have the opportunity to implement those gifts and talents. And when I talk to people and I'm interviewing now, I say, if you want to go to a place where you can really be impactful and make a difference and walk away feeling like you have given everything you can give to an organization, we're the right place for you. If you want to be kind of that cog in the wheel that's just doing your thing and you're part of it and it's going well and that's enough, then we may not be the right place for you. And Hiffman did everything that I had hoped it would do. It took advantage of every gift and talent I have. Doing things like this, for example, I've done a lot of articles, a lot of panels, never was on my radar. I pitch business, not something I thought I would do. I knew I wanted to lead teams. I now have 120 people. That was not something I had in mind either. I thought 10. So,
yeah, right?
It really was a place that needed to take advantage of every gift that every employee has to really be competitive in the market.
Yeah.
And so they were looking for people to do that with. And so that's, why I came here. What we've been able to do with that then is to make sure that that continues all the way down. So everybody from engineering all the way up have the opportunity to be a part of conversations, to be a part of planning. We have 10 task forces, for example.
Wow.
And we create new ones every year. And those task forces are things that our teams deal with on a day-to-day basis that we want their opinion on. And everybody can join whichever one they're interested in. So we're not saying you're going to be on this task force. We're saying which one do you have interest in and where do you think you can add value? And they get a chance to be part of changing the processes and the procedures that we have to give them that voice and that chance.
It's awesome. I mean, and this is the culture piece is such a relevant thing when you talk about workplace and space,
Absolutely.
right? And all the things people are considering right now. Why, the remote versus in person, or why would people come back into an office setting or a commercial real estate setting? So it's great to see that you're not an HR, you're not a traditional people leader, but you are setting policies and enacting plans like these task forces that really do impact and promote that culture that was what attracted you to Hiffman in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I tell everyone there was something great here already, and I just wanted to take and grow it and build it and to kind of customize it based on what I thought was going to help us. And what we've really seen is taking that initiative to really focus on the people, to grow the people, to create that consistency has helped the business grow as well.
Sure.
And we had the best year we've had in 2022, which I think is really a testimony to what we're doing culturally and how that carries over to both the tenants and the clients.
Awesome. You talked about the task forces. Are there some other things that Hiffman does differently? You've had experience with a number of firms. What are some other things that you do as part of the leadership team at Hiffman that kind of moves the needle?
So I think, obviously that open door policy piece, very often I'll hear employees say, you don't normally get the chance to sit down and talk with the head of the department. You don't get that opportunity to give a thought or an opinion or say, hey, this isn't working. We'll move people around if something's not working. We want it to be the right fit for the employee, for the team, and for the client. If it's not, you're not going to get the best end result. And so I think that's a big game changer. And that goes all the way up. I sit with the CEO. I sit with our new president, who's wonderful. And we have conversations about where we're going and what we're doing. And that culture carries all the way through as well. I think that's a big piece of it. One of the other things we did in 2022 and 2021 was something called Emerging Leaders. And it was very similar. And I loved your first question because that is exactly how we started Emerging Leaders, because everybody's story is so unique and we wanted our teams to hear that. That program was created to give our teams access to parts of the real estate market that are not the day-to-day property management. So we would bring in speakers, clients, people within our own firm, and vendors as well, who had a really unique perspective on something. So whether it was why they purchased a property that they plan to redevelop in the city of Chicago and why that purchase made sense now versus 5 years from now, so our team could understand that kind of acquisition mindset, to our CEO and how he got to where he is in that exact same conversation. And he has a very unique story as well. So we really tried to give people that exposure to more than just their day-to-day.
Sure.
Day-to-day property management is not the most positive experience, right? You're typically dealing with people's problems. Nobody calls you and says, thank you, the bathroom is clean.
Right.
They call you and tell you it's not,
Right.
or we're appreciative the roof is not leaking. Those types of conversations don't happen. So giving our people a chance to see the whole picture of why we do what we do and why it matters really helps them to have more engagement in their day-to-day.
Has the feedback been positive? Have people said, we really like this, we want more of this? Or is there, obviously part of that would be retention or employee engagement. Have you guys been able to measure this as an effective initiative?
Absolutely. Our retention has been amazing. I think the last time we took a count, we were at about 86%.
Wow.
So we were having great retention. Our leadership team, there's 10 leaders now. Of those 10, all of them have been with us the entire 5 years.
Wow.
It was originally 3, it grew to 10, all with internal growth.
Wow.
So we have great retention, and the feedback we get is exactly that. Whether it's somebody who's been with the firm for 15 years and saying, wow, I really like the direction it's heading, or whether it's somebody new who just joined us from another competitor that says, this is really different than what I was experiencing and I'm really enjoying it. It's really affirming, and it helps us to keep moving in that direction and find new ways to be better.
It's awesome. Something you said in our planning call, and I want to quote it, was life is a curve, not a straight line. You learn from the curves.
Absolutely.
I thought that was such a great quote. What advice do you have for young people? And then we talked about your kind of figuring your reentry and starting your career in property management at such a young age. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for young people saying, I don't know what I want to do. I need to figure it out. I feel like I need to figure it out. But talk a little bit about that from your experience.
I think that's such an important thing, and I think it's overlooked a lot. And I talked about this a little bit last week. Gen Z, which is our new entering the workforce generation, they've grown up different than some of us have, and they had COVID to deal with, and so their school experiences were different. And giving them the opportunity to recognize it is not all straight, right? You don't get on this path and it goes exactly the way you planned. And there is that expectation on some level.
Yeah.
I have a lot of young employees that I spend time talking with and coaching. I do a little coaching on the side of a handful of clients, have children in college that have asked me to have conversations with them. And then I have 3 myself. I have 2 in college and 1 on his way. And so having those conversations of it's okay to take a dip and move a little bit differently than you had expected. Learn from it, though. That's the key. Those curves are where you have your greatest growth. The straight line is awesome, and you want to stay as focused on your end goal as much as you can, but recognizing that you can shift. I mentioned, I thought I was going to be a teacher. Yeah. That's what I thought I was going to do. This was my calling, and that's clear. And so it took a little bit of shifting and trying a couple different things to figure out, no, this is where I need to be.
Yeah.
I think the best advice I can give anybody is embrace those curves, learn from them, but be willing to try things. Be willing to say, I think this is what I want to do. Okay, it's not working. What would be a similar situation that I would like? Be honest, ask for guidance. I think that's my biggest concern for this generation coming into the workforce now is they're so focused on texting and email and their phones that the actual connection is a little bit different. Don't be afraid to say, I need to understand something more. Can you explain that to me again? Can you tell me what would you recommend? Those types of conversations are absolutely invaluable. And not taking opportunity to learn from the people around you is a mistake.
Yeah.
So take that chance, ask the questions, go shadow people, make networking connections. All of those things are going to help kind of build you into where you're headed to go.
And we're so fortunate now that we've emerged beyond the pandemic that we can do that again.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. I think it's interesting because you look at people's resumes or you look at someone from afar and say, man, that person really had it figured out. They went in a straight line direction. They got it. But we've talked to so many really successful leaders on this show, and it's almost never the story. So yeah, I think it's important that young people just realize that it's going to be a curvy road. And to your point, those curves are where you probably pick up the most knowledge.
That's right.
And experience.
That's right.
So let's talk about the ability to be back in person for a minute.
Okay.
Hiffman is doing 5 days together and then 5 days remote.
For our corporate management team.
For your corporate management team. Now, that's a strategy that we don't hear as much. It's usually 3 days a week, pick your other 2. It's usually for Monday, Friday, or 2 days a week sometimes. Yours is more of kind of like the fireman schedule, right? Where you're together for a period of time and then you're away for a period of time.
That's right.
How has that worked?
It's been amazing. And it was a very intentional decision. One of the things that we do very differently is we really, really think through before we roll something out. We want to make sure that it makes sense. And we kind of test it and we'll ask questions of our leadership team. How does this feel? What do you think? We decided that having 5 consecutive days was important. People needed the chance to continue to work on projects together, to continue to collaborate, to continue to be innovative, and to have that opportunity to listen to each other when they're on calls and to have that experience. In-N-Out didn't offer you that same opportunity. And so our teams come in Thursday to Wednesday.
Okay.
So it is not 5 days, an entire week, and then they're out an entire week. It is really 2 and 3 days each week, but it's 5 consecutive days. The other thing that we did is we set some really clear instructions related to this. So the expectation is when you're in those 5 days, you're in. Now, we're in a business where we have to travel. We manage industrial buildings. We manage properties that are all over the country, actually. And so that 5 days from home, the expectation is that's when you're visiting your properties. You're going to be using that time to run around, to see your tenants, to do things that you need to do. Obviously, that's not going to work all of the time, but that's the goal we're trying to achieve. so that your time in the office is truly meant to be collaborative and for growing and mentoring and the chance to be together. That togetherness is really something that I think a lot of people are missing.
Yeah.
And not just because we as human beings want to be together, because that is just a natural thing, but also it's that learning, that piece that we're talking about. There are things that happen that if you're on a Teams call, you aren't thinking about sharing. Right. But if you're sitting at the cube or the desk next to someone and they hear you talking about it, then they're learning just listening to you talk about it. They're not getting that same exposure at home.
And one of the things I love about that is it builds in flexibility, which people need and want and expect now. But it also leverages what is really important around bringing people together is that people are together. The option to come in whenever you want and pick your 3 days a week, you don't know who's going to be there. And there's technologies that allow that to happen. But even the best workplace is not a great place to be if no one's there, right? Or if the right people aren't there. So it's the people that make the place, and we know that. So with your plan, you've got the people there. So you can really take advantage of the space because the right people are there.
That's right. And it's interesting. I had somebody say to me yesterday that they were having trouble getting people in, but the leaders wouldn't come in. I said, it doesn't work then. Right? They're coming in for that exposure. They're coming in for that experience. So on our side, on the corporate leadership team, we're all in 4 days a week. Typically 5, but 4 is the requirement. So we can have 1 day from home to kind of catch up on things. But generally speaking, we're in every day. And that is so that everybody has that access to the leadership team. As far as the teams and their leaders have to be in with their team. So the entire team comes in. If there's 35 people on that team, they're all in the same 5 days. And that allows for that collaboration and that connection that we just don't see everywhere else. And it really is, I think, what's made it so successful for us. Now, our offsite teams are in 5 days a week. They all get 1 day from home, but the rest of the time they're in together. And that's because they're in buildings where we want to see people in there. We are a real estate company. We do want to see people come back to work. But as a leader and somebody who's studied organizational leadership, that connection and that being together is definitely something that needs to happen. And we need to figure out this balance. And I do feel we've found a good way to do it.
And I'm sure you, like lots of other leaders, can sense the tangible energy shift when those teams are in the office versus when there's just a few, right? Like
Absolutely.
It's night and day feeling.
It really is. And that energy is what helps us, again, grow, develop, be better. And when you don't have that chance to be around it, you're missing out for sure.
Definitely. One thing I thought that was unique about what you had told me with 120 people on your team is that you interview them all.
I do.
And so I think that in and of itself, from a leadership perspective, is an incredible first impression, that you are there as part. But I think that also gives you a lot of insight as to just how do you pick the right team? So what advice do you have for leaders looking to put together a high-performing team? You're really interviewing each individual person, and you've got that experience yourself with being on the interviewee side and actually being, doing the interview too. What do you look for in an interview? How do you run an effective interview?
Wow, it's an excellent question. It is a couple of different things. I'm asking very specific questions. We're in a business that's very busy, that requires you to kind of think on your feet all the time. So I'll definitely start with particularly people coming in from the business that haven't been in it before, whether it's a new graduate or whether it's somebody who's making a career shift. I'll give examples. If I've got 5 balls up in the air and I ask you to keep them there and I give you 3 to deal with and leave those 5 up there, but then go back to them when you're done with these 3, is that exciting or overwhelming?
Yeah.
And I've seen it on people's faces and they look terrified. And I'm like, okay, that's not a fit. So trying to figure out what gets them excited, talking about the task forces, talking about the things that we're doing to make sure that our people have this chance to grow and develop. You will see people light up and be excited when they're hearing those things if they're the right fit, right? The people who are looking for that, who are a little bit more entrepreneurial in spirit, who are a little bit more, I want to be a part of something bigger. When you start talking about who we are and what we're doing, you start to see that reaction like, this is definitely something I want to be a part of. That's that first piece.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we're looking for senior people, the skill set's important, right? We've got to make sure that they can do the job that we need them to do. But generally speaking, I'm looking for that combination. I know our clients and I know our people. And so the reason I interview every single person is kind of 2 reasons. One, I want to make sure that fit is right. Is this person going to fit well with that team? Is this person going to fit well with this client? Is it somebody who is a little bit more sensitive and maybe the client is a little bit more direct and maybe that's not going to be a good fit? But the other reason is I want to know each person. I want to understand why they're making the move. Why are you switching jobs? What are you looking for? What's your goals? If I don't have those conversations with them, how do I help them achieve them? And that has been probably the biggest game changer, because I've got somebody right now who joined us who's a property assistant and new to the business and was like, I want to, run the world, for lack of a better way to put it. And she's got the energy and she's got the excitement. And so as new things come up, I start talking to her leader and say, what do you think about including this person in this project? It would give this new experience. It would give her a chance to grow. And had I not had those interviews or those conversations, I wouldn't have known to think of her.
It's cool. And it sounds like you guys also do a lot of internal promotions as well. So that's cool to see. You find the right person on the bus, but then they're also growing their career, as they expand their time at Hiffman.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a really important piece for us is, we want to make sure that we're giving our clients consistency. But one of the ways we do that is the layering of people that we have. So our teams can grow and stay with their client, become a team leader, and we can backfill underneath. And that team leader might now have 2 or 3 clients versus just one client, but they still got that touch to the client they started with. And that has been something that our clients have shared with us as a really big differentiator, because they're used to seeing a property manager leave because they get a new opportunity or go to a different position, and now they're starting all over with a new person. Our clients don't ever have to start all over. There's always going to be somebody who's been touching it that's going to be consistent throughout.
We've talked about culture, transparency, exposure to leadership. The conversation today, as we all know, is how do we earn the commute? How do we get people back, right? The leaders seem to know that being back is important. And you guys have some unique ways that you're encouraging. You're doing it, I think, in a very effective way. Are there other ways, given all the different clients that you work with, the buildings that you manage, that you've seen leaders effectively encourage their teams to return to the workplace?
I think the most important thing, I love the earn the commute comment. I've heard it a couple of different times in a few places, and I think that's a really important statement. What people mean when they say that is not earn it from a financial perspective. Don't give me a milkshake when I get there. Right. Like, that's all great and exciting, but that game room, that workout center, that milkshake that you're giving away for free are great incentives, but that's not how you earn the commute. You earn the commute by making sure that the time that they're spending in the office is well-used time.
Right.
You want them to walk away at the end of the day feeling like, wow, that was a great day. I'm really glad I went in. If they're sitting at their computer in their cube, not talking to anybody the entire day, there's no difference. There's no reason to come in. They can do that from home. So what are you doing as a leader to really show that difference? It's by stepping in and talking to them and connecting. I have a team leader who does a monthly lunch with her entire team. It's 30 plus people. And I get included on the emails and offered to join them. And it's a great opportunity. And they all come together and they don't talk about work. It is just having lunch together. Finding ways to have people feel connected, heard, to say to them, what are you working on? Can I help you? Is there something you want to spend time learning? Giving them that coaching opportunity. That's the piece I think that's being missed. And about a year ago, I was on a panel and this conversation came up and everybody's saying, what can landlords do to bring people back to the office? And I very honestly said, it's not up to the landlords. This is a leadership issue. This is not a landlord issue. The landlords have done everything. The buildings are safe. They've had the events and people pick up their taco and they go home. It's not working. What needs to happen is at the leadership level. You need to make sure that you're coaching and guiding your leaders to be looking at their people and what they're doing with their time while they're in the office and making sure that it's effective and useful.
That's so well said. And I think the leaders know what is suffering when their teams are not there.
That's right.
And so lean into those things when they come back.
Right.
Make the teams that are coming in feel like they're part of something, like there's purpose, like they're developing faster than they could on their own. I just think there's so many ways to do it, but you're right, it's a leadership thing and probably somewhat of a communications thing too.
Absolutely.
To have to have those teams understand why the team is better off together, right? So that's great advice. Well, you've given us so much insight. We like to finish every conversation with a couple more personal questions, although you can keep them professional if you'd like. But we ask every guest what's something they're looking forward to in the next 12 months. It seems like you guys have had a lot of growth at Hiffman, and in your 5 years, there's been a great deal of innovation and progress made. What's something that you're looking forward to in the next 6 to 12 months? And it can be personal or professional.
I'll give you an answer to both.
Oh, good.
So personally, I have a daughter graduating college and excited to help her kind of forge her path and where she's headed. And I have a son graduating high school who will be heading off to the University of Kentucky. And so excited to have them both kind of step into that next phase of life. It's a fun place as a parent to see your kids kind of become their own and take their life on and to watch them do that. So that I'm very excited about. And probably the biggest thing I'm excited about is to help them do those things. But professionally, it's to continue what we've been doing. We have continued to grow, as I mentioned. Last year was a great year. we want to keep that up. We want to make sure that we're growing. We want to keep evolving. We want to make sure we're continuing to be our best. I'm really looking forward to spending more time one-on-one coaching with my leadership team this year and really giving them a chance to grow and manage their teams a little bit differently. We're doing a couple book clubs this year that, will help in our leadership development. Just looking forward to having that chance and to take our client base and show them what we can do in the cities that we aren't working for them right now and create that consistency that we know they need. It's an odd time for real estate right now. And the best thing we can do is be the best partner to our clients. And I'm really looking forward to doing that and showing our clients how we are the right partner to help them in this time.
Awesome. Is there a resource that you have found particularly useful in your career, whether it's a book or a podcast or a networking group? Is there something that was especially beneficial to you that you could recommend to others?
I am a big reader. So I'm not, I do podcasts, but I definitely love to hold a book. And so my probably two favorites is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I'm a big fan of that book and my team is going through it right now. It is a great way to talk about how to have really honest conversations in a kind way. And there is a balance there. And understanding that balance, I think, is critical. And I think this book does a great job of helping people along that. But one of my all-time favorites is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team as well. I think, a book like that helps you look at things a little differently. And I think that's important. I think we very often have blinders on and we focus just on kind of what's in front of us. And we have to take those blinders off and broaden our horizons and our knowledge base so that we can make sure that we're understanding everything that's out there.
Two great suggestions. And my final question, you've already answered this a little bit when we talked about the young people and the learning from the curves. But let's say you were retiring tomorrow, and you had the new leadership team was going to be filling in your shoes. What's some words of advice or words of wisdom you'd leave them with?
Wow, that's a deep question. I think be true to who you are. Put the people first. I think that absolutely makes a difference. And I mean all people, right? Remember that every day you have a chance to be impactful in a positive way. And so think about your choices, the way you speak to people, the choices you're making. Is it making a positive or a negative impact? Make sure that it's positive. And I think most importantly is give it your all. I think that's the one thing that I tell my kids. My story is unique and I have, worked really hard to get to where I am. But a lot of that was giving everything I've got to everything I do. And I think that is a really important thing to recognize, because if you do that, it is recognized and it is seen, and opportunities will come if you're a hard worker who wants to give your gifts and talents away.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it works well for you.
Yeah, I really don't like the quote, work smart, not hard. I think you have to work hard to work smart.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
absolutely. And I think that's a great point. I think so often we lose track of, what really gets it done, right? You have to work hard. You have to want to work hard. You have to want to make a difference, and you have to be a good person in that same process. That combination of being your best version of you, going home at the end of the day feeling good about the way that you treated others and the work that you did and being proud of that, that is never going to be a negative, right?
Yes.
That's always going to be a great way to approach life.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and
Can't
thank you enough for your time and your insight. Congrats on all your success, and
Thank you.
Looking forward to everything that is still to come with the work you're doing at Hiffman.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.